I do not tell this story anymore. Stopped in 71. After the third time a man looked me straight in the eye, nodded politely, and excused himself from the table, like I would said something that offended him. My wife Ruth told me people do not want to hear things that do not fit. Like the world is a drawer and some things just will not go in. She is not wrong. But I am 61 years old, and my hands have not stopped shaking since that October night in 63, and I figure I am owed one more telling. To someone who might sit still long enough to hear the whole thing without looking for the door. My name Silas Vance, Corporal, 1st New York Light Artillery, Battery E. Loader on a 12-pounder Napoleon smoothbore. I knew that gun the way you know your own face. Every scratch on the bronze, the way the left wheel creaked on cold mornings. The exact weight of a canister round when you have lifted 10,000 of them. I am telling you this because what happened that night was not confusion or poor visibility or fear making men stupid. We were professionals. Battery D had been at Second Bull Run. We would been at Antietam. We had seen the elephant, as they said, seen it up close and personal, and we knew the difference between what was real and what was not. What was in that valley was real. I need you to understand that before I go any further, it moved through physical space. It displaced air. It interacted with matter. The trees are gone. The trench is still there. I went back in 1878, and it was still there, 15 years later, overgrown but unchanged. That same smooth U-shape in the Virginia clay, 40 feet wide, running 300 yards back into the tree line. Real things leave real marks. All right, let me start where it started. We would been positioned on that ridge since the second week of October. A scouting party had reported Confederate infantry movement in the Culpeper Valley below, a possible flanking maneuver to catch General Meade's supply lines. Our orders were to establish an observation and interdiction position, which in plain language meant sit on this ridge, watch the valley, and if rebels come through, make them regret it. The ridge was good ground for artillery. Elevation maybe 250 feet above the valley floor. Clear sightlines to the east, a solid limestone shelf under the soil that gave our pieces a stable platform. The valley below was mostly hardwood forest, oak and hickory, with a creek running through the middle that we could hear on quiet nights. Good ground. The first 3 days were uneventful. Cold is what I remember. That particular Virginia cold in October that gets into the wool of your coat and stays there. We ate salt pork and hardtack and watched to the valley and saw nothing except deer and once a black bear working the far tree line. The other thing I remember about those first 3 days is the quiet, not peaceful quiet, the other kind. You spend enough time in the field and you develop an ear for the natural sounds of a place. Birds in the morning, wind through leaves, small animals moving through undergrowth at dusk, frogs along the creek after dark. A healthy forest has a voice, constant and low, like breathing. This valley did not have that, or it had it during the day, but at night it stopped. Not gradually, the way sounds fade when a storm is coming. It stopped like a candle being snuffed. One moment, there were frogs and crickets, and the other normal sounds of night. Then, nothing, no transition, just silence, total and sudden, as if every living creature in the valley had simultaneously decided to hold its breath. I mentioned this to Sergeant Aldous Burke on the second night. He was my section chief. 15-year army man, had served in Mexico before the war. He listened to what I said, and then he was quiet for a moment. And then he said, "I noticed that too." "That was all," he said. But the way he said it, I knew he would been thinking about it. The fourth night is when it started, October 5th. I remember the date because I would written a letter to Ruth that afternoon, and I dated it clearly because I was trying to be more regular about correspondence after she complained I would missed her birthday in September. October 15th, 1863. I wrote that we were in good position on a fine ridge, and that I expected we would be back in camp within the week, and that I missed her cooking. I finished that letter at around 4 in the afternoon. By midnight I would fired more rounds than I would fired in any single engagement of my entire service, including Antietam. Let me tell you what the night was like. Clear sky to start, quarter moon, enough light to see the broad strokes of the valley below, temperature dropping fast, maybe into the upper 30s. Our section had 4 Napoleons positioned along a 60-yard front at the ridge's edge, with a 5th piece held in reserve. My gun, we called her Margaret. Do not ask me why. That is just what she was called when I joined the battery, was second from the left. The fog started around 9. That is not unusual in a river valley in October. Cold air off the creek, warm ground. It makes fog. I have seen it dozens of times. But this fog was wrong, in a way I first tried to describe to people over the years, and never quite managed. The closest I can get is this: most fog softens things, blurs edges, makes the world gentle and indistinct. This fog felt like something was being hidden. There is a difference. I know that sounds like a fine distinction to make, but when you are standing at the edge of a 200-foot drop looking down into it, you feel the difference in your chest. It rose fast. Within an hour of starting, it had swallowed the valley floor completely. You could see the tops of the tallest oaks still sticking up through it, 20 or 30 feet of bare autumn branches above a white sea, and then even those disappeared by 11 o'clock. Sergeant Burke posted a double watch. He did not explain why. He just did it, and none of us argued. I was on first watch, midnight to 2. Corporal James Fetters at my left, Private William Oakes on my right. We stood there and watched the fog and listened to the silence. At approximately 12:30, we heard it. I need you to stop and let me try to describe this properly, because I failed at this part of other time, and I think it is the most important part. It was not a sound that announced itself. It grew, started below the threshold of hearing, more vibration than sound, something you felt in your feet before you heard it with your ears. The limestone shelf we were standing on, it transmitted it like a tuning fork, a low, rhythmic, deep pulse, not a drum beat, nothing that regular, more like footfalls, but wrong in scale. The way a footfall sounds when you put your ear to the ground and someone walks past, that resonance through solid earth. Except this was coming from down in the valley, traveling upward through 250 feet of rock, and it was moving. That was the thing that made your mind refuse to accept what your body was feeling. It was moving, not circling, not random, not the kind of irregular movement animals make when they are grazing or rooting. This was directed movement. It was moving from the far tree line toward the creek, and it was moving slowly, deliberately. Fetters grabbed my arm. He did not say anything. He just grabbed my arm. I went for Burke. Burke came to the edge and stood there for maybe 90 seconds, feet spread, perfectly still, and I watched him feel it through his boots. He was a man who made decisions fast and did not second-guess himself, which was why he was a good section chief. But those 90 seconds were the longest I would ever seen him stand without moving. He said, "Get the lieutenant." Lieutenant Nathaniel Graves, 24 years old, Harvard man, from a good Boston family, genuinely competent officer for his age. He would been asleep in his tent for 4 hours at that point. When I woke him and told him what Burke wanted, he came fully alert within seconds, which was a skill I would always admire about him. He felt it too. The four of us stood at the ridge's edge and felt that movement in the rock beneath our foot, had listened to the silence above it, that unbroken, wrong silence, with no crickets, no frogs, nothing, just the deep rhythmic pulse coming up through the limestone. Then we heard the other sound. You need to understand, I am not using this word for effect. I have chosen it because it is accurate. The sound from the fob below was the sound of something immense. Not immense like a locomotive, not immense like a herd of cattle, immense like geography, like a moving piece of the landscape that had decided to go somewhere. It was the sound of trees breaking. Not crashing, not falling, not the crack of a tree when it comes down in a storm. The sound of something pushing through trees the way you push through tall grass. That slow, continuous, crackling tear of wood fiber giving way under steady pressure, and it was getting closer. We could hear it moving, tree by tree, up through the valley toward the base of the ridge, and still no voices, no human sound, no animal sound, nothing that could explain it. Burke said, "Load canister." Graves said, "On whose authority?" Burke said, "Mine, sir, if you need someone to blame later." Graves looked at him for maybe 3 seconds and then said, "Load canister." All pieces. Canister shot is a can packed with iron balls, anywhere from 27 to 48 of them, that turns a cannon into an enormous shotgun, anti-personnel short range. At 200 yards, it loses effectiveness. At 500, it is nearly useless. Whatever was in that valley was far enough away. That canister should have been wrong. We loaded it anyway. I want to tell you what waiting felt like. The whole battery was awake now. 48 men plus officers, the ridge's edge, all of us feeling that pulse through our boots, all of us listening to something enormous moving through the forest below. Nobody was talking. I have been in battery positions before action, and there is always nervous talk, jokes, men checking their equipment. That night, there was nothing. Complete silence from 48 experienced soldiers. The fog below had started to move, not dissipate, move. Something was pushing through it from underneath, creating slow swells on its surface, like a stone thrown into still water. Except the stone was somewhere in the dark below, and the ripples were 40 feet wide. The trees were still breaking. Closer now, closer, Graves said quietly. Elevation. Burke said, "Cannot give you elevation, sir. I cannot see a thing down there." Graves said, "Best estimate." Burke thought about it. He said, "Whatever it is big enough that you cannot miss it." Graves said, "Fire when you have confidence." I want to stop here and ask you something. Have you ever been certain something was coming for you, and known you could not stop it, and had to do something anyway, because doing nothing was worse? That is what those minutes felt like. Not courage, not military discipline, just the animal knowledge that you do not stand still and something is coming, even if you are not sure what you can do about it. Burke said, "Fire." I loaded. That is my job. I loaded and stepped back, and Burke adjusted, and the gun fired, and the sound was enormous in the night quiet. The muzzle flashed bright enough to leave spots in your eyes, and then the smoke rolled back over us, and we listened, and heard nothing, no cries, no animal sound, no impact of iron balls on earth, or wood or flesh, and the trees kept breaking. Burke said, "Reload, fire at will." That is when it became something else. Something beyond tactical engagement or any category that training provides. We stopped aiming. There was nothing to aim at. We loaded and fired and loaded and fired, and the guns of the other sections joined in, and the ridge became continuous. Noise, nothing but concussion and flash and smoke, and the smell of burnt powder. And still the sound from below kept coming. Here is the thing I have never explained properly. Not to anyone, not to myself. We were hitting something. You develop an ear for it. After 2 years, you know the sound of canister rounds, impacting earth, impacting wood, impacting bodies. They are different sounds. This was the fourth sound, one I would never heard before. A deep, wet concussion, like impact on something tense and yielding at the same time. Something that absorbed the rounds rather than deflecting them. And it did not echo the way impacts echo in open terrain. It swallowed the sound, muffled it, like firing into a hillside that was also alive, and it kept moving. That is the detail that broke men that night. Not the sound itself, not the unknown of it, not even the fog or the silence. It kept moving. Round after round, sections firing in rotation now. All 4 guns plus the reserve, an unbroken chain of fire into the fog, and whatever was down there just kept coming. I stopped thinking at some point. I know that because I have no memory of the middle stretch of the night, which is unusual for me. I remember Antietam in detail. But those hours of continuous firing are gone. My body was there, loading, stepping back, the mechanical actions worn deep enough by training. They did not need thought. But the part of me that records experience was not present. I remember the guns. I remember when Margaret began to change. Bronze does not glow easily. It takes sustained heat far beyond normal service to show visible color. After 2 or 3 hours of near continuous fire, the guns were hot enough to blister your hand. But that is true after any hard engagement. What happened later was different. I reached for the breech to assist with a reload and pulled back. The metal was faintly orange, not glowing like forged metal, just the suggestion of internal light. And the heat coming off it pushed you back from a foot away. Burke said, "Water on the wheels. Keep the carriages cool." We did not have enough water. Margaret's barrel was warping. A slight but unmistakable curve near the muzzle. The gun next to us had its cascabel drooping half an inch from true. We were melting the guns, and we kept firing. I do not know how to explain that, except to say that by that point, the alternative was unacceptable. Stopping meant that thing kept coming. Stopping meant we would done all this for nothing. Stopping meant silence and waiting, and not knowing. And I believe if Lieutenant Graves had ordered us to cease fire at that moment, someone would have kept loading anyway. The sound from below was changing, not stopping, changing. The tree breaking had slowed, the movement had slowed. And there was something else now, a sound I have no comparison for, a low, sustained sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once, not from a location in the fog, but from the fog itself, from the valley, from the air above it. Not a voice, not mechanical, something organic, and vast, and expressing, if I had to name what it expressed, displeasure. Then, gradually, between one chain of shots and the next, the movement stopped. The sound stopped. The pulse in the limestone stopped. Burke said, "Check fire," and we did. All 4 guns went silent simultaneously, and we stood there in the ringing aftermath of hours of artillery fire and listened to absolute, complete, total silence. No fog movement, no tree breaking, no pulse, no sound from the valley at all. Gray was beginning at the eastern edge of the sky. Nobody slept. Nobody moved much. We stood at the guns, or sat behind them, or leaned against the limbers, and watched the sky get lighter and the fog in the valley below slowly, slowly begin to thin and pull apart as the temperature rose. Graves and Burke stood together at the edge. I was close enough to hear them. Burke said, "What are we going to find down there?" It was not a question. It was the thought he was preparing himself for. Graves did not answer right away. Then he said, "I do not know." Burke said, 112 rounds per gun, 5 guns. Graves said, "I know how to count, Sergeant." They were both quiet for a while. Then Burke said, quietly, "We should have hit an army down there. We should have hit whatever the hell an army is, and we should have destroyed it twice over." The fog lifted fully around 7 in the morning. I have thought about what I expected to see. I think I expected Confederate infantry. A regiment, maybe 2, torn apart by 500 rounds of canister at close range. I expected the aftermath of an artillery engagement, which I had seen before, and which is not a pleasant thing. I had prepared myself for the evidence of what we would done. I looked down into the valley. The creek was still there. The far tree line was still there. The morning sky was clear and pale blue, and everything was still and ordinary. The trees along the path of movement were gone, not fallen, gone. Where the oak and hickory forest had been, from the far tree line to the base of the ridge, there was a swath of destruction, 100 feet wide. Trees were reduced to splinters at their bases, not cut but torn. The wood fibers peeled back and scattered in every direction. Stumps out giant broken teeth. Wood shredded fine enough in some places to look like straw. The path ran straight. No curves, no meanders, no search pattern. Straight from the far tree line to a point approximately 40 feet from the base of our ridge, and there was the trench. It started at the base of the ridge, in the soft creek-bottom mud, and it ran back along the path of destruction toward the far tree line, smooth-sided, U-shaped, in cross-section, approximately 40 feet wide, 10 feet deep at the near end. The edges were not torn or broken. They were pressed, compacted, the clay squeezed smooth, as if by something rounded and unimaginably heavy, dragging itself backward through the ground, 300 yards of smooth trench in the mud. No footprints, no body parts, no blood, no equipment, no evidence of any human presence, Confederate or otherwise. Not a single fragment of iron canister shot on the ground within the trench. 500 rounds worth of iron balls, and we could not find them. Burke sent 3 men down with Graves to examine the scene. I was one of them. I walked the trench end to end, touched the walls. The clay was cold, smooth, damp. At the near end where it deepened toward the ridge base, the walls had a faint sheen, pressed hard enough to polish. Graves found splinters with impact marks consistent with canister shot, which meant the rounds had been hitting the trees, deflected from their actual target into the surrounding wood, which meant something had been absorbing the rounds and continuing to advance. I picked up a handful of shredded wood. It was warm, not from the morning sun. Just warm, the way wood is, when something living has been pressing against it. I put it down and walked back up the ridge, and did not talk to anyone for the rest of that day. Here is what the official report said. Battery D engaged suspected enemy infantry forces in the Culpeper Valley on the night of October 15th. Sustained fire resulted in repulsion of attacking force. No enemy casualties confirmed. Estimated 200 Confederate infantry in approach. Cause of forest destruction consistent with artillery engagement. Equipment damaged to 4 pieces due to extended firing. No mention of the trench. Graves wrote it, and he was a thorough man, and he simply did not include the trench. I asked him about it once, in the winter of '64, why he had not written it down. He looked at me a while and said, "What would you have had me write, Corporal?" I did not have an answer. He said, "I wrote that you repelled the attack. That much is true. The rest of it I do not have the vocabulary for." He was right. I do not have the vocabulary either. 61 years, and I still do not. What I know is this: something was in that valley. It came up through the earth, or it came through the forest. I do not know which. It moved toward us for reasons I have never been able to understand. We fired 500 rounds into it, and the rounds could not stop it, and only slowed it. And then, at some point before dawn, it turned around and went back the way it came, and dragged itself down through the clay at the base of the ridge, and went somewhere underground. And the ground held its shape. That is the part I keep coming back to. The trench it left held its shape. 15 years later, 30 years later, it is still there, holding the shape of whatever made it. The valley is still quiet at night. I know, because I went back twice, once in '78 and once in '89. I camped at the base of the ridge both times, in full October, the same cold and the same thin moon. And both nights, right around 9 or 10 o'clock, the natural sounds of the valley stopped. Just stopped, like something down in the earth turned its attention upward. I broke camp both times, rode out in the dark, and did not stop until I was 20 miles from that valley. I am 61 years old, and I still sleep with a lamp burning. Margaret, my gun, was assessed as damaged beyond practical repair. The barrel deformation had compromised her accuracy past acceptable tolerance. They melted her down for scrap bronze in the winter of '63. I was there when they did it. I watched the metal run liquid and pool in the mold for a new piece. Some future gun that would go to some future battery and fight some future engagement. I watched the bronze run, and I thought about how hot she had gotten that night. Hot enough to warp, hot enough to glow. And I thought about the fact that 500 rounds into a target at close range had not produced a single body. I thought about the sound of the impacts, that deep, wet, absorbing sound. Whatever it was not hurt, not permanently. Whatever we did to it with 500 rounds of iron, and whatever we did to our guns, pushing them past their limit, we annoyed it, at most. Inconvenienced it, and then it went back down. Ruth used to say I was a different man after the war than the man she would married. She was not wrong. Most veterans are different after. You see enough death and enough suffering, and you come back different. That is understood. That is expected. But the difference in me was not from the battles. It was from one October night in a valley in Virginia, when I learned that there are things in the world that artillery cannot stop, and that the earth is deeper than we think, and that whatever lives at the bottom of that depth is patient. So patient, it will still be there. When you read this, when you pass this story on to whoever comes after you, whatever made that trench will still be there, deep in the Virginia clay, in the dark under the limestone, where we cannot feel it, waiting for the next time something wakes it, waiting for the next time it decides to come up. I have 2 grandsons, good boys. They've fought for. They have never been to Virginia. I'm going to see to it they never go.